Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. From the Missouri State Capitol, we are joined by four of the new state Senate class. Representative, former, now Senator Nick Schroer. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Jill Carter, Senator Carter, first time on the show from down in southwest Missouri, right?
Yep, that's right.
Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you.
Tracy McCreery, it's going to be hard for me to not call you representative for a while. It's going to be like when you fill out a check, writing 22 on it. Senator Tracy McCreery, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And Senator Curtis Trent, the guy that's been a senator his whole life. Welcome back to the show.
I was glad to be here.
You're starting off a new chamber, new session. What are you looking to get done?
Well, so fortunately, a lot of the things that was mentioned in the Pro Tem's opening speech are things I care about a lot: education reform, criminal justice reform. So I'm looking forward to working on those issues, and I think that we've got a real good opportunity to get a lot of those things done this session.
Senator McCreery, a Pro Tem speech is different than a speaker's speech. There's probably some things in that speech you could go along with, right?
Definitely. It feels great to be sworn in with my colleagues here and get to work. One of the things I noticed in the pro tem speech is there were a lot of things that we all could agree make good for good public policy. Obviously, I disagreed with the president on a few things, but the lens I'm going to use moving into this session is focusing on things that are important to working families. Good jobs, great schools, and things that give people a fair chance to get ahead. And so that's going to be the lens I use to evaluate what we do moving forward.
Nick Schroer, former representative, what'd you think?
I think it's a good start. Going from where we were, a lot of the priorities of Republicans dying last year because of the fighting in the Senate, we're walking into a minefield. But we need to address things like criminal justice reform, crime, public safety. That turns into business opportunities for recruitment and bringing businesses here in St. Louis and Kansas City. Tax reform, education reform. So
something you've talked about for a long time.
Absolutely.
Is criminal, as looking at how really St. Louis, let's be honest, deals with violent crime.
Correct.
There's a groundswell now to bring the St. Louis Police Department back under state control, starting with the St. Louis Police Department wants it. Is that going to happen?
I hope it does. I think working with some of my colleagues that I've worked with, like Senator Steve Roberts, Barbara Washington, I firmly believe we'll be able to have some sort of resolution which is going to protect the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of the people in St. Louis and the surrounding areas.
Senator Carter, you have the greatest perspective of all. You've actually been talking to real people. These folks have been here for 5 months a year for a long time. You come to the Senate. What's something you want to see done?
Education reform, IEP reform, the initiative petition process, I think needs adjusted. From having my colleagues here from some of the bigger cities, I would really like to see more of an equalization of the voice of all of Missouri. So that's a priority for me, is IEP reform process being ratified, changed a little bit there. I think we're all in favor of education reform. Men out of women's sports, lower taxes. I couldn't agree more with Tracy than to say, yeah, working people, right? They need some help right now. So let's see what we can get done.
Senator Trent, you've sat across the other side of the rotunda and watched. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, well, you know what? If the senators fight all day, nothing passes. Well, the public's safe, right? But it was more. People say toxic. I don't know about that, but there was more rancor amongst the senators personally than I think anybody had ever seen before. You'd sat across the rotunda and saw the same thing the rest of the state did. You look at the Senate culture right now. How's it going to compare to that?
Well, I'm very hopeful for the Senate culture as it exists right now. It seems like there are a lot of people who genuinely like each other, who have a history of working with each other, and who have common interests. And those interests are the objectives that the people of Missouri sent us to the legislature to try to accomplish. And I think that we'll see, at least it's my hope in this session, the elevation of Missouri's priorities over any interpersonal conflicts that might exist.
Sure, I've watched you mention this on social media. The people that moved across the rotunda know each other well, for the most part, have worked with each other, and not in a particularly rancorous way. It was, well, maybe not agreeing on everything, there was certainly a good professional relationship amongst the people that are going into the Senate. It does feel like it's almost like a freshman caucus of like the women in the Senate put their foot down a couple times last year and said, all right, boys, knock it off. The freshmen seem to have their own kind of vibe going.
Well, I think, dealing with a lot of these bills that the House fought over, passed, and basically died in the Senate's hands because of the infighting, going back and forth. This new freshman class, it's almost like a new sheriff's in town. We want to get back to the business of standing up for the people, debating with Republicans, debating with Democrats to figure out what's best for our people. And, having attorneys like Curtis, Mary Elizabeth, individuals that have been spending time down here, wasting time away from our families, away from our businesses. We want to get back to work and not waste another session. So that's where I think the culture is going to be different. Hopefully we can have that professionalism like Senate's had in the past.
So, Senator, you've kind of got to sit across the rotunda. I mean, Brian Williams, he hasn't had to wear out even one pair of shoes yet. Really, Senate Democrats got to sit back and watch Republicans fight Republicans. That's probably, while you're a nice person, a professional, if the Republicans stop fighting each other, they're going to start fighting you.
Well, no one wants that, so that is for sure. So I think we have some interesting dynamics. So first of all, there's 8 new senators coming in. So about 1 in 4 of the senators are new, this freshman caucus. But we also have a record number of women that are serving in the Senate. For the first time in our state's history, we have 12 women that are serving in the state Senate. So, those are some interesting tidbits that I think are going to affect the dynamics in a positive way.
As you've come across the rotunda, I know last session, the women in the Senate had a very constant line of communication with each other, bipartisan, and a couple times would come together and talk, and more than once would bring in some of the people causing the problems and talk to them. That usually led to things happening, whether those things are good or bad, subjective. Have you seen that have you been welcomed into that club of women in the Senate?
The women of the Senate have been very welcoming to us. I feel like we're going to be able to get a lot of things done. And, the reality is, and we know this from watching your show, is the vast majority of things we do in state government are things we all agree on. Most bills pass overwhelmingly. It's just there's a few issues here and there that make the news because they're it's when people are fighting. But there are going to be so many things we can work on together.
So it's got to be interesting. I know you were not unfamiliar with the Capitol, but it's a different thing when you're there every day. I'm sure you're hearing these stories about how these people just scream and holler at each other all day, and you're like, that can't be that bad. And then you come up here and people are like, oh no, it's that bad. What is your take on walking into a chamber that has for 4 years just everyone's been at each other's throats?
I'll be honest, walking in it from an outside perspective, I just have the attitude and mindset that, your fight last year was not my fight. Unless you make it my fight, I'm willing to fight the fight that needs to be fought. As a mom who's of 5 kids, who's up here, I got invested on the outside, hoping that you guys would do the right thing up here. But I saw that wasn't happening, and the bills were getting stonewalled, and the things that people really want wasn't happening. So that's why I decided to throw my hat in the race and say, okay, again, I'm sick of the fighting. I'm sick of the good Republican issues, us not being able to work together. I don't think they're really Republican Democrat issues. I think they're all Missouri citizens want a lot of the same things that we do. And so I'm here to roll up my sleeves and get some work done. I don't care who moves the ball.
It's so interesting to me, your perspective. In the House, we're going to pass whatever our party wants. Doesn't matter. We're on the score up. But in the Senate, to reach a vote, you have to have some, maybe not support, but you have to be able to go to senators and say, okay, would you just sit down and vote on this? It's really not in the Senate, it's what gets voted on.
And so probably it's a good thing that I skipped the House. Because
Could be.
Because that's what my mindset is anyway. Look, guys, stop playing party politics, right? Again, and you look across the state, the country, and you see what's going on in Florida, more Democrats in that legislature than, as far as Democrat, Republican, majority, minority, they have more Democrats in their legislature than we do, and they're knocking the ball out of the park. So I think we've allowed the media to somewhat wedge us into certain corners, and I'm not here to play like that.
I have noticed this. There is a way. I've watched women legislators. They don't take every slight as personal. Things don't go to the mattresses quite as severely and as fast as with men.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the testosterone.
Have you noticed that? I have seen that in the Senate.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
There you go.
Like strong men.
Yeah, and I think the balance is incredible. I'm a dad of 2 daughters, and I understand that sometimes it does take that matriarch to come in and bring everybody back together, make them
I would
realize
say
what
your
really
wife
truly
could thump
matters.
your head if you get too far out of line.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about something that wasn't in the pro tem speech that I think I watched a lot of Republicans agree. I watched every Democrat agree. He talked about some things to help with postpartum funding. I think a lot of people didn't know that when the woman has the baby, if she has to have any care after, even associated with the birth, Medicaid doesn't pay for that. It doesn't seem logical.
Right now in state law, once a woman gives birth, her health care is cut off after 60 days. And We know from the data that we collect is that a lot of mothers die between day 60 and a year after they give birth. So, one of the things, in my opinion, if we want to truly be a pro-life state, we have to be doing things that help keep new moms alive so that they can take the best care of their children as well.
So, Trent, these are the type of things I've watched you. They're good government things. You're going to have a Medicaid program, right? People can argue how big it is, but it does seem like something that makes some sense to do.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think we should, whenever we're administering a government program, we always talk about running government more like a business. Well, what does the private sector do in these kind of instances? What are the standard practices that occur in other programs where that kind of care is administered? How do we restructure government to make sure that we are achieving the goals that we set out to achieve with some of these programs? We're trying to reach the most vulnerable populations. Have we narrowly tailored the direction of the program to achieve that outcome? And so I think as we look at these kind of issues, like the one that we're talking about here, that all those factors are going to be important when we decide where to go with it. But the devil's always in the details with these kind of programs.
Senator Carter, it does seem to me that, when you talk about administering the Medicaid program, some of the things that have been discussed do make sense. I mean, if you're going to care for someone up to the point they have a kid, well, the things associated, especially with having that birth, that kind of makes common sense to me.
No, I was actually caught in the elevator with Senator McCreery over here, and we were having the conversation. I would love to get more up to speed on what that issue. I did not know that was a case in Missouri with the Medicaid program.
I think a lot of people didn't.
No, right? So I think always the line that we try to draw, and I don't think this is just me, is compassion versus enabling, and where that balance is, right? Are we enabling people to stay home or not have good health practices, or what's the mental health piece that allows, that plays into staying home for a year and not being productive? All of that is such a factor. And so in my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, what is the proper role of government, and what is the line between compassion and enabling? And you're never wanting government to enable, somebody to do something that isn't necessarily healthy or good. So
I watched Senator Rowden call Elaine Gannon, someone from your area. They call that one of Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman's bill, someone you know very well. On the base, it looks like common sense government things, the kind of things that maybe didn't get done last year that might make government just run better.
Well, on the Medicaid issue, I'd like to see the bill. A lot of great points that we're discussing right here. But with 1.4 million people reliant upon Medicaid, there's still so many problems with it, and the most vulnerable are not able to get the care that was designed for them. So I think along with these reforms, which I think, prenatal care, postpartum care, we need to ensure that the most vulnerable are getting the care that they actually need. We need to reform the system because it is broken. My wife in healthcare, many of our friends and family in healthcare have shown us the problems that the current system has, where those that are disabled, single moms, anybody that needs this adequate care is not able to get it like it was designed to. So I think with these expansions, we also have to have reforms as well.
Hope you'll stick around maybe for the next segment with us, if you don't mind. Well, sweet. No filibustering. We'll have all four senators stick around with us after the break. But first, go to showmissouri.com. This is Missouri one county at a time. Talk about Phelps County got down. Visit with Senator Brown. Talked about the Brown family legacy there in Rolla. Also talked to an old buddy, just retired, Randy Verkamp, former presiding commissioner down in Phelps County. Go to showmissouri.com. This is Missouri one county at a time. We'll be right back after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Data captured by our state-of-the-art monitors helps us pinpoint the timing and location of severe weather more accurately and respond to trouble more quickly. Ameren Missouri's investment in smart technologies like this is one way we're improving reliability and restoring power faster than ever. Responding to trouble before trouble hits. That's Energy at Work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to Week in Missouri Politics from the state capitol here in Jeff City, in the second floor rotunda with Senator Nick Schroer. Thank you for sticking around. Absolutely. Senator Carter, thank you so much for your first appearance on the show. Hopefully not the last one.
Thank you.
You're like, Senator McCreery, you're sort of like the Alec Baldwin to Saturday Night Live of our show. You've been on more than anyone else. Senator Trent, one thing that's been discussed a lot, one thing I think the governor's going to discuss in the State of the State next week is teacher pay. There is some logic to, if everybody else in the world's getting pay raises, teaching is not all, it's a tremendous profession, but it's hard. A lot of red tape to it. Well, to me, the answer that the business community came up with is you have to raise pay. I mean, I think you make, what, $15 an hour working at McDonald's. Teacher pay is going to be a big deal in the governor's speech. How's it going to strike you?
Well, so I mean, anytime you look at pay, I think you look at retention rates, turnover rates, and if you're and just being able to hire high quality individuals. And if you're having trouble in any of those areas, then some kind of configuration is off. Either your pay is too low, the working conditions are not what they should be. There's some kind of problem there. And so we definitely need to address this issue, but we need to do so in a responsible way that, again, envisions the whole nature of the job. So if more pay is what is needed, I think that should be on the table. But I think we should also look at those other parts of the issue. What are the teaching conditions like? Do they have the resources that they need, professional development-wise, and other things to bring people into the teaching profession where it can be an actual career that people want to pursue?
So, Garth, it's an interesting thing. You know, I see a lot of people like for the first time, and they start talking about what they want to do, and they sound a lot like a person that probably should have ran for school board. When you talk about teacher pay, I think it makes a great point. A lot of things go into losing employees, right? If you're in business, you learn lots of reasons people leave jobs. Is that a state decision, or is that something you leave to school boards?
I think it's a cross-section of a lot of what's happening in our culture right now, and a lot of it needs revisited. I see a lot of similarities in what's going on with education as you do public servants, right? Police force, things like that. Most of the time, people get into the job because it's a heart job, right? It's a job of the heart. Yeah, when you go in to become a teacher, you're willing to accrue debt or something like that, to do something that you feel like you're personally called to do or would, I don't know, thrive in. But when you get into that culture, there's a big shift in not feeling like you have fulfillment in that position anymore. And
even a hard job though, there comes a point when in your life where you got to get paid, right?
No, of course. But it's elements like Curtis spoke very well about that. Sometimes it's just not one issue. It's not just pay, right? And if you start talking about pay, I'd give you $1 million. If I give you $1 million and tomorrow's your last day to live, it's not all about money, but it is.
It'd be a heck of a day. It would be a good day for the Anheuser-Busch Company.
He wants the first day off.
I mean, ultimately, though, it's not all, and we seem to have this mindset that pay drives everything, and it doesn't. So.
Senator McCreery, guys, here I go again. It does, if there is multiple factors, who makes that decision? Does the state tell you what you do with your budget, or is that a school board decision?
It's a really complex formula. In the area I represent in St. Louis County, talking about minimum teacher pay doesn't really apply to the districts I represent because the teachers are paid much, much higher than the average in the state. So, I think that we all can agree that kids should have access to a world-class public education. And then you've got all these different factors, teachers' pay, but also class size is a big deal. And the thing I'm concerned about is we're seeing a trend in the state of schools going down to just having school 4 days a week. And, that really is a conflicting issue for me, because back during COVID, a lot of folks were hollering about keeping schools open, but now schools are just going 4 days a week. And, I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to prepare students to be ready for the workforce of tomorrow. And I'm not sure 4 days does it.
I was really happy to see that the transportation was fully funded the last 2 years. And because I think in rural Missouri, that's a lot of the reason why they decided to go to a 4 day, because it's like, okay, we're not running our buses as much. The electricity is not on as much. So a lot of those decisions, I think, were based on
money. Well, it has to warm Senator Brian Munslinger's heart. See that foundation, that transportation wasn't funded. Sure, if teacher pay is an issue, or it could be something else, professional development Is that a school board decision what to do with that money, or do you say, hey, you're going to raise this pay from the state?
Well, I think in our positions, representing the many counties, many different school districts that we do, the school districts and the school boards have to have a discussion with us. I think they have to be a part of the broader picture, which is going to be school choice and education reform. Teacher pay is absolutely going to be a part of that. I worked with the governor's office a couple years ago on a plan. We didn't move forward with it, but it was a plan consolidating some of these superintendents, using that excess pay, maybe capping the pay, but using all of that extra pay to give to the teachers. But again, it's part of a broader discussion on education reform that I know we're going to have this year under the leadership of Caleb Rowden and Dean Plocker.
So I watched the education committees formed by the pro tem and the speaker, and it might lead one to think that they really want to do some education reform. Of course, everybody's for that. What it means is different people. I know what Caleb Rowden was on last week. He said what it ultimately means, but he brought up an idea, and you're one of the smartest policy people that I personally get to talk to. He talked about how you pay teachers, and he talked about how in many school districts, you get a raise by seniority. And in most jobs, seniority is a portion of your pay, but it's also on how well you produce. And that, I tell you, I normally hear on education, I'm like, oh, what the lobby's telling this time. That actually makes, it's hard to argue with, I think.
Now, again, like earlier, we talked about going back to running government more like a business. And, and what that means is that you take best practices from the business sector. And this is a great example of that. If you, hopefully experience brings more efficiency and greater proficiency with your job performance. But if that isn't the case, ultimately, businesses have to reward performers. And if you reward performance, you get more of it.
And it's tough to do a performance because, frankly, you could take a person from your district that is in a district where have two parents at home helping those children, and you could even go to, southern Ripley County, Missouri, and it's not the same. Here's a question: what does the education reform mean to you?
Well, it could mean a lot of things.
It means a lot of things. There's about 163 people on one side of the building, it means something, and 34 on the other.
Well, exactly. And, I think what we have to keep in mind is that public schools have to take in everybody, which means we have students with a lot of different capabilities. Sure. We have students with visible disabilities, but also hidden disabilities. And then we also never know what's really going on in that student's life outside of the classroom. So we have to take all of these things into account, and we can't just blame everything on the teachers and the school districts, because there are a lot of kids that are coming to school without their teeth brushed and with empty stomachs and things like that. And I just don't think it's fair to to put all of the weight of the world onto these educators.
I think we always kind of, government tends outside looking in, right? So correct me. But we tend to look at things as an either or, right? It's either pay or it's this, either or. And I think oftentimes there's a broad spectrum of issues that we have to be able to be willing to talk about. When you're talking about assessing teachers based on performance, our assessments in schools teachers often don't even know how well the kids are done until they've taken that end of year assessment, and they don't get the results of those till next year. So we've got to look at these assessments as well, right? With education.
And isn't it just like a test? You fill in the circles that you could get back quickly or something?
No. And again, it's just such a broad issue that we have to really be willing to look at all of the pieces. Buzzwords are really nice and they're handy and they're emotional, but honestly, if we really want to do the hard work of unpackaging something, we have to have a broader conversation about what's...
The senator's point of, you don't know what kids are excelling, what kids are being left behind, what kids have disabilities. The focus needs to be on the kids also when we look at education and what is best for that child in particular, allowing the parents to figure out what school is best for them, not just because they're in a zip code that doesn't have good schools. They should be able to figure out, pursuant to our Constitution, they need to get a education that is good for them.
And letting the school districts,
letting
the school districts compete more openly and fairly in a fair market system, right? I mean, if you look at charters, we don't have charters down where I'm at, but St. Louis, Kansas City, charter driven. A lot of charters go out of business, fail, right? And the state comes in and shuts them down. But letting schools function in more of a free market system where, look, in our school district, we would love our kids to learn Latin and more of a classical model, but right now they couldn't do that. They can't compete because they have these requirements from the Department of Ed that say what they can teach and what they can't teach.
Well, Blair Oaks, they learn state championships, but there's something you've talked about. Nick, you probably talked about this ever since you came on my show the first time, which is a long time ago now. I have gray sides. You have just one or two. IP reform. You're the attorney here. Give me a fair, the IP system right now, I think if you're a Democrat, you're like, well, this is the only way we can get stuff passed. If you're a Republican, like, well, it really negates a lot of the power of the legislature and the people. Tell me what a good system is.
Well, I think when you look at the system as a whole, it is good to allow the people of Missouri to have access, if the legislature is going to be gridlocked, to give them access to changing our laws, changing even our Constitution sometimes. But the threshold is so low, and I think the last time an actual citizen did this was the Hancock Amendment. You look at some of the initiative petitions here in the past. You've got marijuana, bingo, gaming, other things that have been put forth that it's being paid for by out-of-state businesses, out-of-state individuals that are trying to change our Constitution. So trying to balance the good reasoning and rationale of keeping the program with protecting our Constitution and not making it so easy for these out-of-state millionaires to change our Constitution, that's going to be the task, but it's one that I'm willing to take on.
I mean, it just, to me, it looks like it's too easy, but it should be possible. You make it a little tougher. Like sportsbook. Right now, people want to be able to bet on the Chiefs. If you don't do something the next 2 years, the Chiefs are probably going to put it on the ballot and win 70%. They're going to write it themselves and take care of it. So there is a little bit of a nice pressure to say, get something done, or we'll do it ourselves. What's a good system look like?
Well, you know, ultimately, I think a good system looks like what the people of Missouri will vote into effect to some degree. Because I mean, this is really the people's constitution. If we are going to change it, it's going to have to be a change that they will vote in a ballot. And so, you know, if you just want to talk about a mechanical, what would a good system look like, I think you need to have a clear distinction between what is a constitution and type language and what is statutory language.
We have a clear distinction. We're about to get thrown off the air. So with a minute left, Nick Schroer, who won the week?
I'm going to say Governor Parson with elevating Andrew Bailey as AG and Vivek Malik, who's going to be sworn in next week.
Who won the week?
Also, Caleb Bradham, honestly, I'm really surprised, pleasantly. Can I say that? Pleasantly
Sure,
surprised.
absolutely.
From an outsider coming in, I really appreciate how he's handled committee assignments and things like that. As somebody who's been on the outside, I wasn't sure how well I would be received for rocking the boat a little bit, and I think I've been dealt a pretty fair hand, so appreciate that.
Who won the week?
Outgoing State Auditor Nicole Galloway. She's been a very dedicated,
Served the state very
talented
well.
public servant, and I've really can't wait to see what's next for her.
She has served the state very well. Probably doesn't get the credit she deserves.
Agreed.
Who won the week?
I concur. I think Senator Rowden Pro Tem won the week. This week was almost a continuation of what seems to be a very long honeymoon with his leadership. I think he's been knocking it out of the park.
It's an old friend of mine, Mike Reed. Guy's been around a long time, ran the Ethics Commission, been with the School Board Association. He's had a little run of bad health lately, but you can't hardly get the best of Mike Reed. He's repairing right now on the mend. Hope to see him back here in Jeff City soon. And we'll see you next week here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, and Sterling Bank.